Welcome to the Sensible Socialist Podcast, a podcast for the rational left.
We need to unite and work together if we're all going to get through this. Sounds like socialism to me.
The amount of people I see talking about socialism positively is actually staggering.
Do you really think that a proletarian revolution is just around the corner in America?
Grab your pitchforks and stab your mayor.
Your hero, Obama.
He's not my hero. I'm
How
not
heroic
fucking
he
idiot.
comes
If Bernie Sanders were president, right, and he wanted to bring the same ideas as for socialism into this country, do you think that we would benefit?
Yeah.
But I just told you Venezuela's eating rats.
But I just want people to have health care. I don't want,
Same thing Hugo Chavez.
oh my god. You people have, worms in your brain, honestly.
Welcome to this episode of the Sensible Socialist Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Gustafson, and today we are going to talk about the big news that just hit this week. That on April 8th, 2020, Bernie Sanders dropped out of the Democratic nomination contest. We were told by the Surgeon General last week that this week was going to be a tough one. The coronavirus is in full swing and is going to take the lives of many people in the United States in this week. And we were all told to brace for that eventuality. What we were not braced for was the rather sudden and unexpected in some spheres, Bernie's decision to drop out of the race. Look, it was a big blow to me and millions of Americans who have been inspired by Bernie and his not me, us message, and the social democratic politics of getting people in more to vote more, having universal health care, universal child care, tuition-free college and universities. These are ideas that are, radical 4 years ago and are now mainstream. And they opened up the sphere for other people like Andrew Yang and others to run and extol other previously unheard of policy demands. So, I was bummed out. I'm not going to lie. It was a very disheartening thing to see the way that this primary election has gone. Look, I've told the story before, but I think it's important. When I was young, getting into socialism, 15, 20 years ago, I found out about Bernie Sanders, the lone, I think he was a congressman then from Vermont, who called himself a socialist. And I did wonder what it would take for the country to be ready for Bernie Sanders to run and or win the presidency. And I think after 2008 and after the quote-unquote recovery that came from that, and the Occupy Wall Street that grew out of the collapse in 2008, that the situation has really shifted. The consciousness of America has moved, and that is in no small part because of Bernie Sanders. But even before Bernie Sanders entered into the fray and became, the figure that he is today, he, I think, recognized what was going on in the country, that there was this massive frustration and desire to make a better country for everybody and to join the rest of the industrialized world in providing what are basic human rights, and to see a country that many people want to live in, that this is a country that has amazing rhetoric and propaganda around the world at what it can be and what it is, and this amazing land of opportunity. But when you actually get here and see what it's like, you realize that it's a lot worse than what people suggested. So, we have to take a step back right now and reevaluate what the situation actually is. Because as much as I supported Bernie Sanders and do support Bernie Sanders in the things that he's running for, I was naive. I felt like the wind was in our sails and we could actually do this thing, but that was naivety on my part. I admit it. Look, I thought the Democratic Party might actually go Democratic and let the people decide who they wanted for their leader. But they didn't. This primary election in 2020 has been a massive media coup and has shown just how powerful the mainstream media actually is in anointing political figures, and specifically very flawed political figures like Donald Trump and like Joe Biden. Because let's face it, Joe Biden sucks. And I will never vote for Joe Biden. This is a guy who has never really run in a contested election. I mean, he's from Delaware, and he basically ran unopposed for 30 years. He obviously can't debate and does a very poor job debating. He yells all the time, as much as people complained about Bernie doing that. You ever see him in debates or even when he's talking to people? The guy just screams out his things and doesn't have any tact or any ability to discuss things with any nuance. He's terrible with people. I don't know, I'm sure everybody saw when he was arguing with the union worker about guns and basically threatened the guy to a fight. I mean, the guy can't even deal with people. He's, except for, of course, women who are usually considerably younger than he is, because he's exceptionally grabby. And not only is he grabby, he's got allegations, multiple allegations, of sexual assault against him. Some of them very graphic and very horrible. This is a guy who told a group of bankers that nothing will fundamentally change. That Joe Biden represents the lamest, middle-of-the-road, centrist, corporate, Democratic wing of the United States. This is Hillary Clinton 2.0, and Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump. I don't see any reason to believe that Joe Biden is going to do any better than Hillary Clinton did against Donald Trump in the general election, in the electoral college, because she might have won the popular vote. By the way, Bernie's voters were the ones who probably gave that to her, and will probably give quite a bit of support to Joe Biden. But they lost the electoral college. They did not go to the places where they knew they needed to win. And do you think that Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump in Wisconsin or in Michigan? Man, you're talking about Donald Trump giving checks out to people because of the coronavirus. Do you know how popular that is going to be when those checks get there? Now, I think it's buying off the electorate in many ways. It's too little, too late. It's not actually doing anything to help the American people. But boy, is it going to make it easier to get reelected, which is, I think, ultimately the reason why this administration even thought about doing any kind of direct cash payment. I don't think Donald Trump cares about regular people, but he definitely cares about being elected. And this is a sure shot way of getting people on your good side. But there's a hidden hand in all of this, and that's the hidden hand of Barack Obama. Barack Obama is all over this nefariousness in the Democratic primary. He called all of the people who weren't Joe Biden after South Carolina and said, hey, look what happened in South Carolina. Joe does really well with black people. You better get out of the race. And who gets out? Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, and they all have conversations with Barack Obama and conversations with Biden. But it's really important that reports are coming out now that Sanders talked to Obama and talked to Joe Biden. And so Andrew Yang, when he was on, I think, Charlemagne the God's podcast, he basically all but said that when he was on the phone call with Joe Biden in which Andrew Yang endorsed him, that he was basically offered a cabinet position. And while that's, of course, technically illegal, Joe Biden doesn't care about illegality or corruption, which, just to mention it, can you imagine Joe Biden going up against Donald Trump with this Hunter Biden stuff? I mean, that stuff's not even over. And that we almost had we had an impeachment that revolved around that. That is going to come up again in the campaign. So this is a corrupt individual who is in a corrupt party who is inundated with corruption, including Barack Obama himself. And, Joe Biden has said that he wants to pick a woman for vice president, probably a black woman. Who is a popular black woman with a popular last name that would give every reason for Obama to get on the phone and to make sure that people get out of the way for Joe Biden? Is it Michelle Obama? I think it is. So look, this isn't all to blame on Barack Obama, but I think Barack Obama is significantly to blame for a lot of things, not just the way that this Democratic primary has gone, but for the whole political situation that we find ourselves in now. I think that Barack Obama has had a worse impact on our politics than Donald Trump has. Everybody freaks out about Donald Trump. Oh, he's so terrible. He's so unregular. And of course he is. He's a freaking idiot who doesn't know what he's doing and just is looking for the pile of money wherever he can find it. That's not hard. But Obama, yeah, that's the real scary character because he could tell you anything and you'd believe it. I read his books. I was convinced that Barack Obama was some kind of, secret or at least nominal sort of socialist leaning person who would do what he had to do, but eventually, implement social democratic policies and move the country towards the left. Hope and change. I bought that. That was all smoke and mirrors. That was complete bullshit. It didn't mean anything. What was the first thing that Barack Obama did when he got into office? Bailed out banks. He didn't. What was his healthcare policy? His healthcare policy was the Republican idea from the 80s. I mean, Barack Obama isn't progressive. Barack Obama isn't even centrist. Barack Obama is conservative, and Barack Obama set the stage for Donald Trump's presidency. It is the neoliberalism of Barack Obama that is the cause of the situation that we find ourselves in today, and even the failure of Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. So you want to blame someone for the situation that we find ourselves in today? You don't blame Ronald Reagan or George W. Bush. You blame Barack Obama because it's Barack Obama's failure to take advantage of the 2008 crisis. That is why we're in the situation that we're in. We have not recovered from that 2008 crisis exactly because of the decisions that Barack Obama made. And those consequences of his decisions are what led to Donald Trump. But it's partially the fact that he was black. Sure, there's a racist component to all of this, but it's also because of the policies that he enacted and oversaw. They set up a situation that is leading perfectly into the next neoliberal shill, which is, of course, Donald Trump. Donald Trump's a neoliberal. He's not a conservative. I mean, he's conservative, I guess, but neoliberalism is conservatism. It is a conservative idea. That is why Barack Obama is a conservative. That's why Joe Biden is a conservative. That's why Kamala Harris is a conservative. And that's why Bernie Sanders isn't a conservative. But again, Bernie Sanders isn't a socialist. And Bernie Sanders is not perfect. Bernie Sanders has a lot of failures and shortcomings. First and foremost, look, Bernie Sanders wants to lead a people's movement, but I don't think he wants to lead a revolutionary socialist movement. Maybe deep down and maybe 40 years ago, might be exactly what Bernie wanted to do. But I don't think that's what he intended to in this whole running for the Democratic nominee process. He wanted to move the Democratic Party from being the centrist Bill Clinton New Democratic Party back to the New Deal Democratic Party. And look, that's a laudable goal. But I think the Democratic Party is unable to be saved. And we have seen now two primaries, where Bernie Sanders has gotten completely rat-fucked by the Democratic Party, and he shouldn't take it anymore. This should be the final nail in the coffin of Bernie Sanders' attempts to deal it all with the Democratic Party. So, what does that mean? That means that Bernie Sanders should start a third party. Now, before you freak out at me and say, oh, we can't let Donald Trump be president again. Blah, blah, blah. One, I don't really see how much worse a second Donald Trump presidency can be than a Joe Biden presidency, except for maybe the Supreme Court, which is a big deal. And I do concede that there would be some differences between who Joe Biden would nominate and who Donald Trump would nominate. But that being said, whoever Joe Biden nominates is not going to be some wild out progressive. It's going to be some milquetoast, liberal, centrist justice. It's not going to be somebody who's going to, shake up the court in any significant way. At most, you'll be able to hold on to the basically conservative, liberal beliefs of the current liberal justices. So it's not as big a deal as I think a lot of people make it out to be, but it is important, and I'm not going to say that it's not important. But the Democratic Party is useless, and it is where social movements go to die, and it's where Bernie Sanders' political career could have gone to die. But he's got a few choices coming out of this, and this is where I think this is what I would propose that Bernie Sanders do. For the remainder of the primary, he does what he said he was going to do in his withdrawal speech. Basically, I'm on the ballot in the rest of the states. Vote for me if you wanted to vote for me. Tally up as many delegates as they can, and shift the Democratic Party in as leftward direction as they possibly can. Sure, why not do that? You can't hurt to do that. You did that last time, and look where we got it. Yeah, a more progressive Democratic platform, but ultimately a not more progressive Democratic Party. So I don't see what this whole process is actually going to achieve, aside from potentially making small movements in the Democratic Party. But I think these elections have shown that the Democratic Party should be a non-starter for progressives and progressive politics. So that leaves Bernie Sanders' Hail Mary pass. What he can do is start a third party after the election. And it doesn't fundamentally matter what happens during this election. This election can go towards Donald Trump, and Donald Trump could get elected president. It could go to Joe Biden, and Joe Biden could get elected president. Either way, the country needs a new progressive third party. People have been saying this for years. Even Bernie Sanders, I think, actually knows this. And it's the last political move that Bernie Sanders could do that would solidify his legacy in the political consciousness of the United States of America. So he should, during this crisis, continue working on the coronavirus stuff, but be prepared after the election, no matter how it goes, to form a new party, the U.S. Labor Party, say. And he should talk to Justice Democrats and the TYT Wolfpack folks and all of those people who have this flawed notion of wanting to change the Democratic Party from within, and say, give up that. That's it. There's no purpose in that anymore. There's no reason to go and try to change a party that is unchangeable. It's the Liberal Democratic Party in England. So let it be it. Let it be a useless, liberal, centrist party. Let's grab all of the progressives, all of the socialists, all of the lefties, and get them into a united party. That is going to be able to really change the face of American politics. Now, are you going to have claims from a lot of people that basically you're splitting the liberal side of the aisle? Yeah, you might say that you will. But there are three different political perspectives in the country. There is a conservative perspective. There's actually four. There's a very radical right-wing authoritarian perspective that I think Donald Trump holds. There's a liberal conservative notion, which I think is the traditional Democratic Party of Dwight Eisenhower. There is the liberal centrist Democratic Party, and then there are progressives. So these four groups should have parties that represent them. These two large parties should not be trying to gobble them up in order to win, because what happens is they don't move more to the right or to the left. They pull the fringes into the center. Sometimes you see, like in the case of Donald Trump, the movement away from that. But that's only a representation of just how right-wing the Democratic or the Republican Party has become. So you need a third party on the Republican side to be able to pull in all of those crazy right-wingers so that you can have the never-Trumpers and the more liberal people go into a more centrist party. Hey, maybe the Democratic Party becomes where all those liberal Republicans go into, so you have a centrist party, a right-wing party, and a left-wing party. That would be much better off than the right-wing party and the center-right party that we currently have. But that's the obligation of Bernie Sanders. He has the perfect opportunity to do that right now. We don't need another R revolution. We don't need another progressive influence group. We don't need another political action committee. What we need is a new third party, and a new third party that can open its hands to all of the socialists and all of the leftists who so desperately want a party to be able to organize the working class and take power. That is exactly what Bernie Sanders could do. That's the opportunity that the situation we're in right now has given him, and that's the opportunity that he should take. Bernie Sanders is not going to be president of the United States. He's not going to be president of the United States as a Democrat, and he's probably not going to be president of the United States as any third party. But he can be the founder of the American Labor Party, a party that could thrive and expand and potentially one day gain the presidency, gain a majority in the House of Representatives and the Senate, and fundamentally change the nature of American politics and American life. That could happen. And that could be Bernie Sanders' legacy. Not failed attempts at a White House, but the successful founding of the U.S. Labor Party. He needs to do that. And I desperately hope there are people around Bernie Sanders who are putting this idea into his ear. Because the idea that Bernie Sanders should just flutter away into retirement is a wasted opportunity. And I don't want him to do what Barack Obama did and waste the opportunity he's been given. This is the perfect opportunity to start the third party that we desperately need and desperately want. And we have the perfect situation to do it. Bernie Sanders could lead a Democratic exit from the Democratic Party, from the progressive wing, found a new party, and have a home for people there right away. You'd be able to say to all the Justice Democrats, to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib and all of those that leave the Democratic Party right now. You're right, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You should not be in the same party as Joe Biden. Leave it. Join the U.S. Labor Party. And if you did that, you'd immediately have representatives in Congress. That would be exceptional. You wouldn't have places that are solidly Democratic be, primary contests anymore. You'd have genuine contests at the general election between two different ideas. That's important. That's way better than a primary contest. And that just shows how popular these progressive ideas could be if they had a party that would actually represent them, like you have in the United Kingdom. This is the situation we find ourselves in. It is not great. I wish that Bernie Sanders was able to change the Democratic Party, it become a social democratic party, and Bernie Sanders could lead the ticket and become the president of the United States. I wish that were the case, but it's not, because the Democratic Party doesn't want it to be. So if the Democratic Party doesn't want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee, then another party should. And it shouldn't be one of the parties that already exist. It shouldn't be the Green Party. It doesn't need to be that. We need a new party with a new tradition, a new history, and no baggage. That is the opportunity we have today, and we damn well better take it, because if we don't, it's another missed opportunity. And we can't afford another missed opportunity. We're in the middle of a motherfucking crisis that is tearing down the fabric of capitalism as we know it. And if we don't have something that rises to the occasion and takes up the mantle of this moment, then we will fail again. And we have the perfect opportunity to do that. The perfect founder, the perfect situation. Take all of this pent-up frustration and anxiety that's coming from the coronavirus and the failure of Bernie Sanders and the failure of the Democratic Party and the legacy of Barack Obama and the influence of Donald Trump, and get the hell out of this situation via a new third party. That's the way we can go. That's the way that we should go. And if we don't, it's only on us that it's a failure. All right. That's my quick hot take on what's going on with Bernie and the sadness that is Bernie's out. But don't worry, there's an opportunity for something to happen, and we can make it happen. But we have to tell Bernie Sanders that this is what needs to happen, and if he doesn't do it, then we need to do it ourselves. There is going to be the founding of a third party in the United States, and it's going to be with or without Bernie Sanders, but I want it to be with. Are you with me? Let's do it. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sensible Socialist Podcast. If you like what you hear, please review it and give us 5-star ratings on iTunes or wherever you listen to the podcast. And feel free to go to sensiblesocialist.com to see all of the content, and send us an email, sensiblesocialistpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much.
Let's have it up.